Welcome to the next entry in RevolutionofEvangelion.org's ongoing Analysis of Evangelion fan-made featurette series, in which we turn to analyzing the guns of Evangelion. I said the guns of Evangelion!
Guns. Lots of guns.
The firearms of Evangelion. Well, why do we need to know this? 1, it's just obsessive trivia about Eva. 2, it's evidence of the overall realistic design scheme that Gainax chose for the storyverse of Eva. And 3, the Weta Workshop props master is going to have to make copies of these when they make the live-action films eventually, whenever that is. And really, for Lord of the Rings, for years, they had people like Tom Shippey and Karen Wynne Fonstad writing about it, and Alan Lee and John Howe drawing it, figuring out, well, how would this exist in the real world? Now, on the one hand, Eva is a cartoon, you can see it visually, but it's still not completely real life. No one thought out, how will we make these as props? Eva doesn't really have that whole support network. You can't really walk into a store and buy a guidebook to all the objects appearing in the series. So we like to hope that the whole goal of Revolution of Eva is to kind of help prepare the way for that by making these kind of guides on our own. But that's a ways off, so we can just hope that they see this. You never know. But the main reason is I'm trying to convince you of the overall realistic design and mentality that Gainax put into this series. Because Evangelion is not a surrealist series. Any series seems surrealist or confusing if you endlessly rewatch only the dream sequences in a continuous loop. Evangelion is the most realistic giant robot series ever made. It brought incredible realism to what had been a decidedly unrealistic genre. Now think about the design that goes into the weapons of the Evaverse. Why don't characters in the Evaverse use ray guns? Ray guns are unrealistic. The audience can't sympathize with the situation, and they're ultimately not as scary as real-life guns. I mean, look at other science fiction weapons, like in Star Trek when they're shooting each other with basically lasers. Eventually it gets almost comical that, haha, he's getting zapped by a beam of light. Even Star Wars, for the most part, they're getting zapped with lasers, and it makes it once removed from real combat, or real violence. But then you have other sci-fi genre things like, well, Blade Runner really set the trend on that. It's the Citizen Kane of sci-fi movies. Where in Blade Runner, Deckard has a normal handgun, and this came out between Empire and Return of the Jedi. You know, people thought it was weird when they're watching it. It's the future. Why doesn't he have a laser gun? He's firing. It's obviously a future design, but it's a normal gun. Well, it makes it that much more cinema verite, you know, visceral and brutal, documentary-like, when he's chasing down Zora in the big chase sequence in the streets of 2019 LA, and he's chasing down this replicant woman, and he's shooting at her, and it's just really violent. And when he finally blows her away, he shoots an unarmed woman in the back. Blood splatters everywhere, and you can see projectiles coming out of his gun, and blood splattering all over the glass that she's running through. And it's just really violent. But, of course, the report says it was a routine retirement of a replicant. To contrast with, this was very brutal and violent. And later on, when he kills Pris, you know, it's emphasizing he didn't just zap some bad guy with a laser. Pris is dead. He basically killed her, even though she's a robot. And there's blood everywhere from what looks like a normal gunshot wound. And then when Daddy is upset that Pris died, it's a real gun. It makes you empathize with people who are shot more. So Blade Runner started that trend back in '82, but a lot of other shows have followed that. I mean, the remake of Battlestar Galactica from 2003, focusing purely on the miniseries, well, the first 2 seasons when the show was still good, just the set design of their storyverse. They sat down and said, this is going to be the anti-Star Trek. It got silly with how many lasers we had. Let's give everyone realistic guns to shoot projectiles, ballistic guns. And the sidearms that the pilots carry are even directly based on Blade Runner guns. It's funny. But through the rest of the series, you see they carry just normal weapons, normal guns that could be found today. Maybe they modify them a little so they're not exactly the same, but they're guns that fire bullets, and it makes it very scary. And a lot of people were surprised by that. And around the same time Battlestar was out, there was also, of course, Joss Whedon's Firefly, which also had people using real guns. I mean, Jane has an entire collection of real guns. And the explanation they have in the verse is that they do have lasers, but they only just came on the market, and they're very advanced, and they're expensive and hard to maintain. So out on the fringes, you would never see anyone with a laser because they're not really common yet. So if you look at Blade Runner, which inspired directly Battlestar, and I think probably indirectly Firefly, they said, well, just because it's the future doesn't mean they need to have lasers, because that makes it a little cartoonish. People empathize more when you're carrying real guns. This entire design aesthetic is called used future. You have sets and props that look like a fully realized storyverse. People actually live and work in these environments, so everything looks like it has been actually used. Battered from daily wear and tear with on-the-spot quick-fix repairs. Battlestar really emphasized this a lot. So did Firefly. They tried to show that they aren't the best ship out there. They're a low-key freighter. In some ways, Star Wars tried to do this. Well, at the time, it was revolutionary that, wow, the Millennium Falcon looks like Han actually uses it as a smuggling ship, and it's a normal day-to-day spaceship. They mix that with laser guns, so it's not quite the full effect of Blade Runner and everything else. Another problem is Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica are set a long time ago, or alternate time, what have you. And Star Trek is set in the far future. Blade Runner and Evangelion are set in the near future, which adds another concern. Designs must be a reasonable extrapolation based on current trends. Battlestar, they would put crazy things on the guns to make it look like, look, it's not a one-for-one correspondence with the guns we use, but it's still recognizably a gun. Firefly's 5 centuries in the future. They didn't need to look like a specific model for anything they made. But Blade Runner and Eva are set, 20, 40 years in the future at most. They really have to look like this is a logical progression of what's happening now. So keeping that in mind, these are all of the guns that appear in the show, and they're all real models. Oh, one last thing I want to bring up before I dive into everything is, please visit the Internet Movie Firearms Database, www.imfdb.org. The thing is, back in mid-2009, this is over 2 years ago, months before Reva.org launched, I didn't have a website yet, so I was just poking around on the IMFDB, looking for pictures to try to match which guns were used in the Eva series. Then, to make sure the work wasn't lost, because I didn't have a website to load it onto or anything, I didn't know if I'd have one, I just wrote up a whole page on Eva on the IMFDB, because there wasn't one yet. I personally wrote up pretty much the whole Eva Guns page on there. I mean, it's been tweaked a bit the last 2 years, but I mean, if you go into the history page, it says V, and it's just every entry on it. And IMFDB is really a great resource. I have had a lot of questions answered on their discussion pages. It's really cool. I'm just worried that, from a strict legal standpoint, the article belongs to the wiki you write it on. I mean, it belongs to imfdb.org. But really, I'm not directly quoting block text from the IMFDB Eva page. I mean, these are facts. I mean, that Misato's handgun is an HKUSP is just an objective fact you get from watching the show. I'm not quoting the whole entry on the IMFDB. That's just where I organized my thoughts at the time. And really, while many images I'm using now are the same as on there, if you go, hey, wow, maybe V was reading that, check, it says V in their history thing, I wrote that. Those are images I provided from screenshots I took of the movie. And really, I mean, the screenshots belong to the movie, but I'm using them educationally. So I'm happy they have an Eva page for that. They have pages for other anime like Cowboy Bebop, Bandred, etc. So I just plop that down. It was before I had a website. I'm hoping they're okay with this because this is free advertising for the Internet Movie Firearms Database. It's being used in educational context, and I'm not making any money off of it. So please, go and visit the Internet Movie Firearms Database, imfdb.org. So like I said, Internet Movie Firearms Database is a great resource. This is research I did and just put on there 2 years ago before I had a website. Now that I do, this is there on their website. It's their wiki page. I'm not trying to infringe on anything, and just this is educational, and look, I'm giving them free advertising. Please go and visit their site. They have a lot of information on a lot of movies. So I don't think I'm infringing on anything because, like I said, I'm not directly quoting anything. So I think that should work out. Well, without any further ado, let's turn to the meat of the thing, the guns of Evangelion. The first one we come to is the Steyr MPI-69. This is the gun that Aoba uses in End of Eva, and it's actually the standard issue gun for all of the Nerve guards in Nerve HQ. There you can see the real one and what it looks like, and this is direct match. Steyr MPI-69 has a cartridge of 9x19mm parabellum, rate of fire 550 rounds per minute, clip size 25 to 32 rounds, effective range of 100 meters, muzzle velocity of 381 meters per second. Now, the standard guards use a folding stock, but Aoba does not. I'll point that out in a minute. See, these are the standard Nerve guards, use them as their basic weapon. And there's one getting stabbed again, you can see they have that. Aoba whips one out and starts gunning down JSSDF commandos with it. He doesn't use a stock on his, though, I guess to make it more mobile. He had it in a desk, so, or in a box underneath, so see, he's not using the stock. And if they were making a live-action film, this is one of the guns that would see heavy use. It's used by all of the guards, so you need a lot of them. And on top of that, it's featured prominently when Aoba is using it. So this is one of the ones they'd have to pay attention for. The next one we come to doesn't really appear that much. It's the Heckler & Koch MP5A3. This was a blinker you'll miss thing. I just threw this in here. You see some of the hazmat teams using it. Cartridge size of 9x19mm parabellum, rate of fire 800 rounds per minute, clip size 30 rounds, effective range 100 meters, muzzle velocity 400 meters a second. It's apparently stockless. You see the hazmat teams using it, and I had to brighten this image to realize that there was a magazine in front of the trigger, and this wasn't an MPI. This is apparently an MP5. They don't use this that much. The hazmat teams use it in one episode, not featured very prominently. Next we come to the Glock 17. This is the standard issue sidearm for all the Nerve personnel in the base. There you can see Hugo loading one, and here's what a real one looks like. A Glock 17 is a semi-automatic pistol with a cartridge size of 9x19 parabellum and a clip size of 17 rounds. There's a famous scene where you can see Aoba hands Maya a Glock 17 and she's too afraid to fire it. And there's a whole scene where Hugo keeps a Glock 17 in his desk and then loads it nervously. There's some thing that was circulating around when the Glock 17 first came out that, oh, it's made of plastic, it'll go through metal detectors. No, it's got some plastic elements to it that make it more lightweight, but there is enough metal in it that'll set off a metal detector. That's just a construction thing, it's nothing. Oh, here's a interesting thing I found out. I was doing a lot of research on firearms databases to find out about these gun models, and it turns out in the English dub by Manga Entertainment, Hugo says safety off when handling his Glock 17. He doesn't actually say an equivalent line in Japanese. They were just matching lip flaps. It's just a common thing, miscommunication between the animators and the dubbers, because animation happens long before that. They just had his lips keep flapping, and he didn't actually say anything in Japanese. So when they dubbed into English, they added in a line where he says safety off. Problem is, Glock 17s don't actually have an external safety on the rear of the gun. Hugo is just racking the slide. The safety on a Glock 17 is basically pulling the trigger forcefully. I mean, if you've seen this, Cowboy Bebop uses this gun a lot. There's a tiny trigger in front of the main trigger, and you have to squeeze both to make it fire. It doesn't actually have a safety on the back of the gun. So yes, 8 years later, we're still finding problems with Manga Entertainment's End of Eva script. They invented a line for Hyuga to match lip flaps that contradicts how Glock 17s actually function. So if anyone ever gets to remaking End of Eva and re-releasing it, please mute that. Well, those were the Nair sidearms. Next we come to the Browning HP, which is the standard issue sidearm of the JSSDF commandos. There you see them holding them when they're storming into the base, and there's a famous scene where one of them directly holds a Browning HP to Shinji's head and is about to kill him. That's what they look like in real life. See, this is obviously the same gun. It's a semi-automatic pistol with a cartridge size of 9x19 Parabellum, clip size of 13 rounds, effective range of 50 meters, muzzle velocity of 335 meters a second. So again, there's a whole scene where he holds the gun to Shinji's head, the camera lingers on it, and you can see it's pretty much the same thing. Next we come to what I think is arguably one of the most iconic weapons used in the series. It's the standard issue main weapon used by the JSSDF commandos, the Heckler & Koch G11. It has a built-in optical sight and a bullpup design. That means the magazine and the mechanisms for the gun are in the stock, the part behind the trigger. This allows it to be held closer to the body. The main innovation of the HKG-11, though, is it has caseless ammunition. This was experimental when it came out. So if there is a live-action movie and they have a giant fight scene in the Nerv HQ corridors, don't expect there to be piles of spent shell casings on the floor left by the JSSDF. It's a point that their guns are so advanced they're caseless. They wouldn't leave spent ammo casings behind. And they use these a lot. Here you see them shooting at Masato with them. Here's them gunning through the corridors, just shooting everywhere with these things. There they are, holding a position with HKG-11s. Other technical info about the HKG-11 is that it uses a 4.73 by 33 millimeter caseless ammunition cartridge. Again, this is experimental. It was meant specifically for this gun. Rate of fire of 550 rounds per minute in full auto. It's one of those guns where it's set up to fire a 3-round burst, though, and the 3-round burst fires 2,200 rounds per minute. If you look at it in the movie, it seems like it's just one shot. It's really 3 really fast, because it's set up to do a 3-round burst. Lots of guns do that. The clip size is a 50-round detachable box magazine. And again, this is an unusual gun. The magazine clips on top of the barrel and inserts below where the optical sight starts. So you slap it on top and pull it towards yourself. If ever you see one loading it in real life, that's how it loads. It's a little unusual. It also has an effective range of 400 meters and a muzzle velocity of 930 meters a second. Now, the HKG-11 is actually a limited run prototype made by West Germany in the 1980s to test the caseless ammunition idea. It was never put into full production. It was the inspiration for some later gun models, though. It gets used a lot in sci-fi movies due to its blocky, futuristic-looking design. I mean, this was in Demolition Man. They use it in a lot of things to show future gun. I need to go on a long tangent here. It was a product of the United States Army's Advanced Combat Rifle Program from 1989 to 1990, which was the search for a next-generation replacement for the M16. Now, I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time explaining the ACR program, because 2 guns in Eva are from it, and it ultimately is informative about Gainax's approach to set design. You see, M16 is the U.S. Army's designation for the civilian Colt AR-15. If ever you hear people comparing the AR-15 to the AK-47, they're comparing M16s and AK-47s. The M16 has been the primary infantry rifle of the USA since it was first introduced in 1963 during the Vietnam War. Now you think, why would the M16 need to be replaced? What's wrong with it? Well, The Soviet AK-47 is an overall superior weapon compared to the American M16, but many obstinately refuse to admit it. The positives of the M16 are that it has better rate of fire and lighter weight, which gives you increased mobility, and you can carry more ammo. The other big positive is they hype this so much. It's so accurate! Effective range while maintaining amazing accuracy is over 500 meters. Now, the positives of the AK-47 are that it has a heavier bullet that does more damage. As a trade-off, it has a lower rate of fire, you can't carry as much ammo, and there is deep and ongoing debate over how this relates to overall firepower, whether it's better to have more lighter bullets or fewer heavier bullets. That's a trade-off, really. But the other big positive is legendary durability. This thing still works in muddy trenches or snow. You can bury this thing in a muddy trench in the middle of winter, dig it up, it still fires. The Soviets intentionally designed it so it barely needs any cleaning at all. Now, the M16 has greater accuracy at greater range, but this is because military planners had an obsession with accuracy that predated World War II. The Soviets researched World War II combat data and concluded that most ground combat doesn't happen beyond 300 meters. So they intentionally designed the AK-47 to not really need to be accurate beyond 300 meters. The negatives of the M16 are that, unlike the durable and also cheap to produce AK-47, the M16 is very complex internally and can break down or jam much more frequently. It's also more expensive to produce. You have to clean the M16 constantly in order to prevent jamming, and you have to possess the tools and knowledge to fix it should part of it break. Now, the M16 was introduced during Vietnam in 1963. Jamming was so rampant that units were getting decimated. I mean, when I was a kid, my father, he was a Nam, he tried to explain this to me. I didn't understand what he was saying. I researched it and I realized that's what he was talking about. It was infamously that our guns jammed all the time and no one knew why. And it took 4 years for people to address this problem. Only by 1967 was the problem finally getting addressed. They had to have congressional hearings on this. And at the end of the hearings, they concluded that, 1, the U.S. military intentionally issued M16 ammo containing high-powered gunpowder for maximum performance, knowing full well this makes them fill up with residue faster and need to be cleaned more frequently. 2, they didn't issue soldiers in Vietnam any cleaning or repair kits in the first place, even if they didn't give it super gunpowder that wears it out quicker, like putting nitro in a car. They didn't have cleaning tools at all, much less for the heavy-duty crap they were putting in them. Basically, the top military staff chose to embrace the fantasy that Vietnam was going to last a few weeks or months and not a long-duration conflict. So they made few long-term plans. You know, the usual quick fix. I mean, with the economy as a whole and like the anime industry today, don't believe anyone who says, oh, there's a quick fix, we can change everything in a matter of months. Big problems take years to fix, okay? Long-duration plans for long-duration problems. But in Vietnam, they didn't want to admit, even to themselves, that soldiers would have to be in Vietnam long enough that they need to clean their guns at all. So, the hearings happened, they changed this, and by 1967 they were issuing cleaning kits and normal ammo, and performance became relatively quite good. When they stopped giving them what was basically like not putting nitro in a car, super gunpowder, and gave everyone kits and told them clean this on a daily basis and this is how to fix it, and a lot of training, that brought the problems down considerably. But this doesn't address problem 3. Reports on the ground from Vietnam frequently pointed out that in the thick jungle, they actually rarely needed to shoot at targets 500 meters away. The M16's much-hyped superior accuracy, bought at the price of frequent jamming problems, was a useless feature they rarely actually needed. Essentially, they made entire platoons composed of designated marksmen. This is pre-World War II thinking about warfare on the open fields of Europe. I mean, and what's really changed since Vietnam? I mean, even today, Third World Wars are often counterinsurgency urban combat like Iraq, or even room-to-room clearing a village like Afghanistan. I mean, just assign 1 or 2 designated marksmen per squad, not the entire squad. This might be going over everyone's heads a little, so let me turn to an example from Halo. Remember, in Halo 1, the standard issue weapon was the assault rifle. And in Halo 2, they removed the assault rifle entirely, splitting it into the submachine gun and the battle rifle. The submachine gun has a range of maybe 15 feet, and it's a bullet hose. It just sprays bullets at targets. And then you had the battle rifle. The battle rifle was a designated marksman's gun. It fired only in 3-round bursts, and it was really accurate. It fired almost like a mini sniper rifle. It was a designated marksman's gun. But it didn't really fire in sustained bursts. But then by Halo 3, they brought the assault rifle back. Why? Well, you see here in Halo 1, you see someone carrying an assault rifle. And now in Halo 2, you see a soldier carrying a battle rifle. Notice that this soldier has been infected by the Flood. What use was a designated marksman's gun for him against a human wave attack by the Flood? If this Marine had an assault rifle, he might still be alive. And now he suffers a fate worse than death thanks to the battle rifle. So then by Halo 3, they had to bring the assault rifle back. Here you see some ODSTs wielding assault rifles. I wonder why. So really, you can't have an entire squad of designated marksmen. Accuracy isn't everything. Reliable, sustained fire is. And think about it. When you're fighting in corridors like the JSSDF in the nerve base, why did you need to fire at 500 meters distance anyway? You're shooting in corridors. So, point is, the Advanced Combat Rifle program from 89 to 90, which was meant to fix the M16, resulted in 4 limited-run prototypes. The U.S. military decided that none of the ACR candidates was an 100% improvement over the M16, which would make it a cost-effective replacement. The ACR program was terminated in 1990 with the official conclusion that the rifle as a weapon has reached its peak, that the M16 could not be significantly improved, and the M16 was the best universal infantry weapon, even though it's been proven to be more of a marksman's gun. And we're still using variants of the M16 today. So they recognized they had problems, made a multi-million-dollar program to make a better gun, and then concluded with, you know what, we're perfect. We don't need to make a better gun. This is just ignoring reality. But again, there were 4 limited-run prototypes that they never went into full production, but they've inspired later gun models. They were the AAI ACR, the Heckler & Koch G11, the Steyr ACR, and the Colt ACR. Now the AAI and the Colt, those look like just variations of M16, but the H&K and the Steyr, they look like really futuristic guns. They look very unusual. So they were like, hey, maybe this is what guns will look like 4 decades from now. And one of those guns was the HK-G11. Now you can see here's the JSSDF holding them again, firing them in the hallways. But really, after all this long story about the Advanced Combat Rifle program, what does this tell us about Gainax's overall approach to designing the EVA storyverse? Gainax didn't make a story set in the far future with unrealistic ray guns. It's a used future environment, set only 20 years in the future. Being set in the near future allows us to connect with it more. When designing EVA, Gainax's overall world-building strategy was basically, what if giant robots fighting space monsters were to actually happen in real life? This affects many aspects of the show. I'm just talking about the guns right now. What would technology be like 2 decades from now, after the second impact disaster? So, to design a story set in the near future, Gainax looked at advanced prototype models available today, and then made a reasonable extrapolation of where these future trends were going to take technology. Well, for firearms, Gainax looked at the recent, well, it was recent when they were making the show in 1993-1995, Advanced Combat Rifle program, and treated these prototypes as a reasonable prediction of how firearms design would advance. I mean, of course, Gainax couldn't control that these prototypes are ultimately abandoned in real life, but that's beside the point. What was important to them was that technology in the story was grounded in realism, based on their educated guesses. Another thing is, firearms technology advances on a scale of decades. I mean, the M16 is from Vietnam, and the AK-47 is from before Korea. I mean, there's upgrades to it, like the AK-74, but they're basically the same design. Guns stay in widespread use for many years after their development, often just for cost reasons. Evangelion is only set 20 years in the future. They're still mostly using guns that existed in 1995 when the show was made. You see, technology is on a bell curve. Computers, home video systems, mobile phones, electronics in general advance very quickly. Think to yourself, what were those things like 20 years ago compared to what they're like now? I mean, 1990 compared to 2010 for computers. But many armies and private owners today still use personal firearms from 20 years ago. There have been advances, but turnover isn't as fast as electronics. I mean, soda can technology hasn't advanced by leaps and bounds after 40 years. And of course, there's still a sliding scale of technology within the storyverse. I mean, computers used by NERV technicians or even the military should be somewhat more advanced than the civilian models. And with regard to firearms in the series, you'll notice this principle is evident when the guns used by NERV are compared to the guns used by the JSSDF. The JSSDF is an elite frontline military force used in rapid reaction commando assaults. They're at the top of the bell curve and have the best guns available 20 years from now. In contrast, NERV was never meant for infantry combat. They state that. And their anti-personnel budget was intentionally slashed. Aoba says, they slashed our anti-personnel budget. We have almost nothing for small arms. So they use guns that are already widely available today, which would start to be slightly old by 2015. You see, they're using MPI 69s and Glock 17s against Browning HPs and HKG 11s using caseless ammunition. It's just a subtle hint that these are frontline military soldiers. They are not. You can see this as just a non-verbal hint that they are not good at this. NERV is not good at combat. When you see they're up against JSSDF, they have better tools than they do. Now, another little hint touching on that, I guess, is that no one in charge at NERV uses their standard issue weapons. Misato, Ritsuko, and Gendo. They never use a Glock 17. They use other guns. This could possibly be because, one, officers are allotted better guns than the regular NERV personnel, or two, they bought better guns on their own initiative because they are aware that the standard issue guns aren't great, and they're paid more so they can afford to privately upgrade to better guns. Well, to better explain what I mean about the divide between officers' weapons and standard soldiers' weapons and the hints this provides, well, look at The Lord of the Rings and Weta's own work on that. Take Éomer. Just by looking at him, you can tell he's got better armor and better weapons than the standard Rohirrim soldiers. It's a nonverbal visual cue that he's an officer. I mean, just looking at him, you can tell he is 3rd Marshal of Riddermark. He's one of their leaders. Guthwine, his sword for the Mark, it's a better sword than other ones. And it's just a layer of the storyverse that they add in the props and costuming department doing that. In the Eva verse, their equivalent to that is an end of Eva when Hugo reaches into his desk and he just pulls out a meager Glock 17, their standard issue sidearm, and he's loading it. And next to him, Misato is loading her HK-USP, which is a bigger, heavy caliber gun. It's a better gun, and it's just this visual hint that she's an officer. Logically, she should have a better weapon to differentiate her, and that she's in charge. I think a great example of this in Lord of the Rings, though, would be Faramir in Return of the King, that when he's leading the charge, you can tell he's got slightly better armor than the standard soldiers. And part of his character is he's not very gaudy or ostentatious. He's just there to get the job done, so it's not incredibly ornate armor. But you can tell he could afford the best armor that was available that other soldiers might not be able to get. So he's got really good armor, and it's different from everything else. And Weta had to sit down and think about this. And from that, we can segue into talking about Misato's gun, which, as I said before, is a Heckler & Koch USP, a universal self-loading pistol. And there you can see a real one. It's a semi-automatic pistol with reduced recoil. Now, there's actually many variants of the USP. I'm not quite sure which one she's using. The three most popular variants are the 9mm Parabellum, which carries clip size of 18 rounds, the 40 caliber Smith & Wesson, which has a clip size of 16 rounds, and the 45 caliber ACP, which has a clip size of 12 rounds, which she's probably not using because those tend to be slightly bigger. I don't think that's what they're representing in the show, but I'm not sure. The USP went into production in 1993, so this was a relatively new handgun when Gynax was making the series from 93 to 95. It would be more modern for 2015. That, Glocks have been around since the 80s. They would be older. That as an officer, she needs a more advanced gun to show she has a better one. There you see it on her desk in certain episodes. There it is when they give her back her ID card in episode 21. Now the big thing is, Misato's HK-USP is the hero gun of Evangelion. It's the only gun prominently used in the series itself, and not just End of Eva. Most guns in this presentation, they're all from End of Eva and the big fight scenes there, but Misato uses her gun, well, brandishes it, in a lot of episodes of the main series. So if this was a movie series, it would be in more than one installment, not just in the last one. So it's the hero gun, it's the weapon of a main character who uses it very prominently in several key scenes. Special attention should be paid to it. It's more important than any other gun in this whole presentation I have here. First, she first uses it when she holds it up to Kaji when he's breaking into Terminal Dogma and threatens him in episode 15. Then later on in episode 23, she forces Ritsuko at gunpoint to show her what's in Terminal Dogma. And she's again using her HK-USP. And then she's really surprised, angry when they show the tank of Ray clones, and she's waving it all around Ritsuko. So it's used in several big scenes as a major prop, so a lot of attention should be paid to it. Also in End of Eva, there's this big scene where the camera lingers on her loading the gun and racking the slide, and it's her preparing for battle, basically. So that's also very important, and you see the whole gun there. Of course, this leads up to Misato's big action scene in the whole series, when she fights off the JSSDF soldiers who are about to kill Shinji, and blows them away. And, she's got a powerful handgun versus they have HKG-11s, assault rifles, but it's a drawn gun already pointed at someone versus a one that's pointed away. Before they can turn, she shoots them all. And then she finishes them off with a contact shot to the chin. No offense taken. So that's the big fight scene that Misato has, and during that she fires 10 rounds in a row when she's fighting the JSSDF soldiers. This is fewer rounds than any clip size of those three main variants, so we can't tell which kind she's using. If she shot 13, I could say it's definitely not an ACP, but because the lowest clip size of those three variants is 12 and she only fires 10, we're not really sure how many she fires. Either way, though, it's realistic. I hate, the way people always hate it when you fired more bullets than were in the actual clip size of that kind of gun. She doesn't fire physically more bullets than this kind of gun could conceivably hold. So it's, again, this is realism in the story. Also, her USP seems to have a rubber grip, which is a variant you can have it with. I'm not really sure. See there, it looks like a rubber grip. I'm not sure how they're presenting that. So again, it's one of the most important weapons in the series. Major prop. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's Eva's version of Sting. It's not. Or Andoril or something, but it is a prominently used weapon. You need to pay attention to this. Another thing is, what you're looking at now is concept art that was circulated about Eva in 1993, 2 years before it aired. This is the prototype for Misato, one of the alternate sketches they did. Originally, she was a lot more paramilitary than the later versions became. You see this one image of her in full fatigues, stalking around with a semi-automatic weapon, not just a handgun. So it's interesting that earlier versions of Misato, she was much more of a soldier and militant with the actual combat weapon, the full rifle, but they phased that out over time. So it's the different interpretations of her they had. I think that image is very interesting. which way Misato could have gone with this. I don't know if like a live-action movie would go back to that or something. I don't know. Now, there are two other important issues involving Misato's gun that don't really fit anywhere else, so I'm going to discuss them here. The first of which is, Misato did not shoot Kaji. The scene is edited in such a way that many fans, independently, thought they were implying this. You know, some of the crazier theories here about Eva online, like, oh, the composite Asuka theory, some craziness like that, they're things that came from message boards that just spread as a rumor, or someone theorized it in a DVD commentary and it spread more than it should. No, like, I have encountered people who never go online, never go to conventions, didn't hear this from anyone else, just watching it off of TV or on DVD, they honestly came to the independent conclusion they thought they were implying that Misato shot Kaji. Now, Gainax was really upset about the very possibility of this. They said we weren't even trying to hint at that. That wasn't like a mystery, you know, even if it wasn't true, it wasn't even supposed to be implied and to keep you guessing. Like, we didn't think people would come to that guess. So they went back and re-edited the scene. This is unprecedented. Well, let me show you what happened. In episode 21, Kaji kidnapped Fuyutsuki so Seilei could interrogate him, and Misato's in a nerve security cell. And then they release Misato, and the nerve security guys give her back her HKUSP, and you see her holstering. Then we see Kaji get shot, but the camera's only on him, so we don't see who shot him. And it cuts immediately from Kaji getting shot to Misato's apartment, specifically to the nameplate on her front door. And then it goes to inside, and she's at her kitchen table crying. Now, the way it cut to her door with her nameplate, like the very instant after Kaji gets shot, led a lot of fans to thinking, are they implying that she shot him? And the way this theory goes, some people think she shot him and was mad at him, or some people even go, oh, she shot him and he was in on it and it was to prove her loyalty to Gendo so he wouldn't suspect her. Like, no. That's just all theorization. And the worst part is it's not just people going, maybe Misato shot Kaji, were they implying that? That's not too bad. I run into people who just go, when they encounter new fans who are curious about this, they go to them, well, as you know, Misato was angry in the scene because she just shot Kaji, like passing it off as if it's fact when it was just something they read into the editing of one scene. So, like I said, Gainax was very upset about this. They said we weren't even implying that. That wasn't our intention. So, a couple years later, well, 1 year later in Japan, but by 2004 in America, that's when it came out, they had the director's cut episodes, which added in some new scenes and changed the editing around. And they actually added in new dialogue where Kaji specifically explains, Seilei is trying to kill me. They're mad because they figured out that I stole Adam from them back in episode 8 to give to Gendo to prove my loyalty. So Seilei is trying to kill me. They added in this new dialogue. And then they changed the order around. You see, Misato gets her gun back, and then we see Kaji getting shot, don't know by who, but instead of cutting to Misato's nameplate, it cuts to just a street lamp. And then the outside of the apartment building, just because that's where the scene is shifting. Then the hallway, you never even see the nameplate, and then Misato crying at her kitchen table. So, and it's not just how they change it. You know, don't argue with me about, oh, well, the way it's edited, it could still support that she chooses. They said we went back and re-edited an episode because people thought one character killed another. So, in a rare move, the creators actually clarified a plot point by directly stating that Kaji was shot by some random security agent from either Nerve or Seilei, whoever got to him first. There's these things, the theatrical pamphlets, the Red Cross book, they're like a glossary. They actually say in those, Kaji was shot by either Seilei or Nerve security agent because they were both mad at him. So this is in written statements, it is in that they went back and changed an episode, they weren't trying to imply this. And the problem is, fans are not free to interpret this differently. You know, it's this whole issue about the religious symbols I don't want to get into, where I've run into fans who actually say, well, there's a symbol on screen, and it's a big cross-shaped explosion. And yeah, to the Japanese audience it was intended for, it was just meant to look cool, but to me, what matters is the impression that I had, that they said, it's some crazy thing, it's hard to explain. They go, when you see a symbol and two people have a different interpretation, which one's right? And they say both, because it's the impression it made in them. There's no objectively true answer. And that even for the Japanese audience, when you see the crosses and stuff, it was not meant to mean anything. They go, well, that was them, but for me it means all this religious theorization, and that's correct, because that's what I think. Well, you're a dumbass. I mean, think about it. Here, are you free to interpret the editing of the scene in such a way that a character killed another character, even when the writers shot down that interpretation by saying, you idiot, that wasn't our intention at all. We had to go back and re-edit it and make written statements saying Misato did not shoot Kaji. So if this isn't open to interpretation, and fans could be wrong about that, maybe they could be wrong about all the other stuff. But just because this comes up, it's not everyone's fault, okay? You know, like, a lot of people, I don't mean to make fun, but a lot of people who are just normal fans who watch on DVD went, were they implying that Misato shot Kaji? What I'm angry about is the people who run around acting as if it's a fact, and telling other people it's a fact, when that's your opinion. You have to at least present it conditionally as, well, I suspect this is my theory. And then they go, well, no, it's not subjective, it's 90% objective. No, that is your opinion, and the writers shot it down. Particularly, the official EVA manga adaptation by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto has been going on for like 15 years. Sadamoto is one of the guys creators who made all the character designs. So it's the official manga adaptation. It's a different continuity, it's slightly different. But he actually, in the manga Volume 8, which came out like 5 years ago, he took the trouble of actually showing the hand holding the gun that shoots Kaji in his version. You don't see who does it, it's probably just some security agent, but he shows it's a revolver with a laser sight, which is nothing like Misato's HK-USP. Just so you could tell by looking at it, it's not even like a similar gun. He wanted people to know it wasn't the same person, wasn't the same gun. And moreover, he actually went even further by changing the order this happens in, that first you see Kaji getting shot, and then 5 pages later, you see Misato getting her HK-USP back. So, in all these different ways, written statements, the manga made by the same guys, re-editing the episode, they were trying to say, guys, you were reading into that, that was a crazy fan theory, we weren't trying to imply that Misato shot Kaji. So I hope we can put that to rest. Now, the second issue I want to bring up, which also has to do with Kaji getting shot, is not from the Japanese original or anything, it's from the English dub. You see, after the TV series came out, they were going to make this finale movie called The End of Evangelion. Like the Serenity to Firefly. The problem was they were behind schedule and there were budget problems, so the movie was delayed, and fans are getting impatient. So they said, you know what, to tie them over, let's put out a clip show movie, anticipating that we'll get the finale movie out in a couple of months. And they called it Death and Rebirth. It's a clip show movie. Like, the first half is just a clip show of the TV series, and the second half is the rough cut of the first third or so of the finale movie they had done at the time. It is completely redundant with End of Eva. It is just a clip show. You don't need to see it at all. You can skip from the TV show to End of Eva. That's the whole story. You know, anime series do this all the time. I mean, like, all sorts of shows on. Wolf's Rain ran on Adult Swim. That had clip show episodes, like 5 of them, but they didn't bother airing them because they said, look, they're a clip show. People wouldn't watch this. So, and they do this for other series too. In Japan, they have clip show movies that they don't release here because no one would watch them, but they're there. So when they say, oh, the Eva movies, there's one Eva movie, The End of Evangelion, and there was a clip show thing they put out before that. The problem is, a lot of the anime industry back then, it was based on the crazy people who were willing to shell out $70 for a new DVD box set, which contains the exact same show but with different cover art. Like the crazies who needed to collect every cover art version. And that's not by accident. Like, companies would start putting out alternate cover art all the time just because they knew people would buy them for the sake of having them. So, because Eva was a particularly... You can only get away with this with popular series, though. And Eva was a really popular series, so they knew if we pick up Death and Rebirth and release it here, it's like printing money. And they did release it on DVD in Japan, too, but they just kept releasing it here, even though you don't need it. You see, back in the late 90s and early 2000s even, the problem was that there wasn't enough anime to go around, and people wanted as much Eva as they could get. Nowadays, the problem is that there's so much anime that you're competing for eyeballs. You know, people don't want to sit through 2 movies. When I try to convince people to watch the ending in the movies, they sit through about half an hour of Death and Rebirth, go, this is just a clip show, turn it off and don't bother to watch End of Eva. So it's really annoying. We need to get rid of that clip show. The bigger reason I'm annoyed, why am I ranting so much about this? It's Manga Entertainment swooped in and got the rights for the movies, so Manga Entertainment, not ADV, made the movies. And it was loaded with all sorts of problems. It was mangled. And, like, there were brightness problems. Even today, people criticize it, hold it up as an example of something had production problems. And if any movie really needed to be remastered, this is it. It needs a re-release by another company. And Manga Entertainment let the rights lapse in 2008, so no one is releasing it now, and someone could conceivably buy it. But it is a really expensive movie, because it was really popular. It costs as much as like 10 other series combined. TV series. So, the problem is, I'm making up numbers here. Imagine you're some anime company, and they go, well, if you want to buy Death and Rebirth and End of Eva, it'll cost $2 million. Well, no one can afford that, so they're not going to release it. The simple answer is just get End of Eva for $1 million and just let Death and Rebirth fade into history. It's just a clip show. So I'm angry because no one's going to re-release End of Eva because it would cost so much money to buy End of Eva and Death and Rebirth, but you don't really need Death and Rebirth. So, this didn't happen in the actual TV show. This happened in Death and Rebirth, the clip show, the English dub by Manga Entertainment. And it does also involve the Kaji getting shot scene. This is a difficult concept to explain, but sound effects commonly used in TV and movies often don't actually correspond to the real-life noise, but we've been raised on TV, so we're conditioned to expect the TV version. Let me use an example. Like, in any sword and sorcery thing, but like Lord of the Rings in particular, when you hear a sword being drawn, you think it goes shing, it sounds like metal scraping against metal. Well, in the DVD commentaries by the production team in Lord of the Rings, they point out that would ruin a sword if you have metal scraping against metal. It would dull the blade. The insides of scabbards are soft. They're not metal. But TV has conditioned people to thinking that's what it sounds like when you draw a sword. So they had to add, they knew full well that's not what a sword sounds like. They had to put in the metal against metal sound effect, that scraping sound effect, because they said people would think it's weird, even though that's not what they really sound like. We're used to that. So similarly with firearms, gunshots overwhelm your hearing in real life, depending on your distance from where they're being fired, and it is difficult to represent this on television. A rare example of when they show what actually happens is in the first episode of The Walking Dead. Rick is running away from a zombie horde, and he seals himself up inside of a tank, and he finds that there's a zombie soldier sitting right next to him, so really quickly he has to shoot him in the head. And because he's firing a gun in an enclosed space and going off right next to him, you can see it damages his hearing, and he stumbles around for a couple of moments disoriented, because it overwhelmed his hearing. That's what happens when a gunshot goes off right next to you. What happens when you fire a bullet or any gun is all the air shoots away from it in a sound wave, and that whoosh of air goes right into your eardrums if you're next to it. If you're hundreds of meters away, it sounds very different because it's not whooshing right into your ears. Whooshing, I don't know the technical term, but you know what I mean. So if you shoot a gun in an enclosed space, just wham, all the air goes into your ears and it really hurts. But if you're like watching news reports on CNN of a combat zone and the reporters are hundreds of meters away from the actual shooting, you notice how it just sounds like rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, like a clapping or a popping noise. That's what gunfire sounds like from a distance. And this isn't like what it sounds like on TV at all, because they want to emphasize that it's like getting your hearing overwhelmed. But there's no way to do that over a microphone. Now, what happened in Death and Rebirth was, you see a scene of Kaji getting shot, then they fade to black and there's a noise. And then Asuka is yelling at Shinji, because Shinji told her that Kaji is dead. Again, it's a clip show, they're showing it out of order. Death and Rebirth's English dubbers thought it was just a weak-sounding gunshot, that's what they called it. And they added in a more stereotypical TV-sounding gunshot effect, the whole kablam noise. They don't really sound like that. Even though it was actually a slap. The Platinum DV set by ADV doesn't even do this. Remember how I said that there's three things. The sound of an actual gunshot at a distance, which sounds like clapping or popping. Then there's the overwhelming real-life gunshot sound at a close distance. It's like a fast roaring wave. It's like you're at the ocean hearing a wave, but really fast, and it really hurts. It's difficult to represent on TV, it's difficult to describe, but it's overwhelming your hearing. And then you have the invented for TV stereotypical gunshot sound effect, which is loosely trying to imitate the emotional effect of how loud a real-life gunshot is. The Death and Rebirth English dub assumed this was a less pronounced gunshot, which is actually what they sound like in real life at a distance. Real life gunfire at a distance might sound like clapping, I guess. And they changed it to the stereotypical TV gunshot effect. They even say in the commentary, it sounded like a slap to us. That isn't what gunshots sound like. That's because it was a slap. What happened was, they took two scenes. Episode 21, where Kaji is shot and they fade to black, and over the black you hear the sound effect of a gunshot of Kaji being shot. Then off-screen in episode 24, they're fading in from black, where Asuka slaps Shinji for telling her Kaji is dead. So it's Kaji getting shot, fade to black, gunshot, then a separate episode, fade in from black, hand slap, Asuka looking upset. To make this easier, let's call them A, Kaji shot, B, sound effect of him being shot, C, slap, D, Asuka standing there. What Death and Rebirth did, because it's a clip show, is they cut out B, the gunshot part, and they overlapped them. And this is just being artistic. They said, let's just now have A, C, and D. Kaji about to be shot, and then they cut into Asuka slapping Shinji, and it's like the slap stands in for the gunshot. You know, metaphorically. So that was an actual slap. And they thought, oh, that's... slaps don't sound like gunshots, and really that's kind of what they do at a distance, and they don't know what gunshots sound like. Look, why am I obsessing over this? I'm not mad at them for this. They're only human. This was just a funny mistake, highlighting assumptions about what gunshots are supposed to sound like. I'm not trying to vilify them. I don't think the English dubbers are bad people. I might have made this mistake just because I was confused about how they were editing the scene together. But it highlights a bigger underlying problem. If they were so confused about it, why didn't they try to ask Gainax what was going on? I mean, making the English audio is their specific job. Okay, look, Eva expert Taliesin Jaffe from the Death and Rebirth dub didn't double-check with Gainax when they had a specific point of confusion about a sound effect, and the English audio is what they were hired to do. So why do people tacitly assume that Taliesin's wild theorizations on religious symbols in Eva, which he wasn't hired to do, were ever confirmed or double-checked with the Gainax creators? I mean, he didn't double-check a sound effect. You seriously think he double-checks all that stuff he rants about the Babylonian mythology and stuff? No, that's something he assumed. They assumed the slap was in there, and that's something they were paid to do. But at least, you know, that was legitimately, they misunderstood what was going on. They just jumped to a bad conclusion. Only human, I don't blame them that much for that. There are mistakes that if you point it out to them, they probably go, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't understand. Like, there are a lot of, not a lot, there's a few key translation errors in End of Eva, like when Masada's explaining the real relationship between angels and humans, but they don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Japanese, it's what their translators told them and they believed them, and he came along with a new translation. They go, oh wow, I'm sorry, we didn't understand that, that's the translation I was given. You know, I'm hoping that if they ever re-release this, people will fix all this. these aren't things they could argue like, okay, that's the real translation of that Japanese phrase, or okay, they meant to use a slap. Really, the one thing I'm not even that mad about, I'm just annoyed from the End of Eva dub in their DVD version that really makes no sense is in the scene when Masato is killing all the JSSDF soldiers, and the one she kills with a contact shot to the chin, they added in a sound effect, only in the English version. They added in a watermelon splat effect. Because they said, well, it's funny that way. Masato is just killing a squad of human beings. That isn't meant to be funny. I mean, they kept the Japanese audio as the original one. It's not even that noticeable, but they intentionally changed that, and it's just odd. Why would you feel that you can do that? So, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, if they're ever re-releasing End of Eva, please change the sound effect back. I'm not vilifying them, I'm not saying I hate them forever, it's just, guys, I really disagree with you for doing that. I don't see why you do that. It was a dramatic scene, it wasn't meant to be funny. Everything else was just a mistake, though, but it shows they weren't double-checking this. Taliesin didn't double-check this with Gainax. Lastly, just on the whole note of Misato and her HK-USP, and bringing up Sadamoto's manga again, what I really like is in Volume 12, which is finally coming out, it finally came out in Japan this year, and it's going to be coming out in 2011 from Viz, the official English translation of Sadamoto's Eva manga Volume 12. It's the first half of End of Eva, finally. Their version of the story. So in Sadamoto's manga version, Volume 12, not only is Masato fighting with her HK-USP, she rips an HK-G11 assault rifle off of a dead JSSDF commando, and she's stalking through the halls, dual-wielding an HK-G11 and her HK-USP pistol, which is just really cool. You see there's the picture there. Okay, I just finished going on a really long tangent about two issues that are related to Misato's gun, that she doesn't shoot Kaji and the sound effects issue. But I really want to get back to the central theme I was trying to point out way back when, which is that there's a sliding scale of technology, and you'd expect officers to have better equipment than the regular infantry, or in this case, the people in charge at NERV, Misato, Risco, and Gendo, have their own guns. That the standard issue handguns are just Glock 17s, and everyone has them. But the people in charge have their own personalized, better guns. In Misato's case, she has an HK-USP. But moving on to the other people who are in charge at NERV who have their own individualized guns, we come to Ritsuko's gun, which is an R92 revolver. It's kind of an odd-looking weapon. It's the gun she pulls out of her pocket and gets ready to shoot Gendo with in Terminal Dogma, right before she tries to blow the entire base up. Here you can see a real one. It's kind of a weird looking. The R92 is a 9mm revolver produced by the KBP Instrument Design Bureau at Tula to make a compact and concealable gun for Russian police to use. That's why it's so thin and small. It has a swing-out cylinder containing 5 9x18mm Makarov 57N151S cartridges, or, as an option, 5 9x17mm short .3080 ACP cartridges, etc. It's a revolver, so spent casings only get ejected all at once when you change clips, and it has effective range of 25 meters. So the big thing is, if this were a movie or fan fiction or whatever, Ritsuko's gun only fires 5 rounds, and it's a revolver, so you shouldn't see spent casings shooting out of the back of it. They come out all as one reel. And last of these three, we come to Gendo's handgun. Now the problem is you can't really see it well at all in wide shots, and in the close-ups, he's pointing it directly at the camera, which makes it very difficult to tell what kind of model it is. Now at first, I assumed it was a Walter PPK, but then I went on to the Internet Movie Firearms Database website. Check them out, they're great by the way. I asked around, and the guys there told me that, no, this isn't what a Walter looks like head-on. And I checked around, and it's actually a CZ75B. CZ75B is a semi-automatic pistol with a clip size of 16, and it uses 9mm parabellum rounds. Just, again, Gendo can afford to choose his gun of preference. He's not using the standard issue ones. He can get a better gun that he prefers. But if you think about it, Masato's HK-USP is a bigger caliber than either of the other two. I mean, Risco's R92 revolver in particular is meant to be concealable. And that really makes sense. I mean, Masato is the head of the tactical department, so it wouldn't seem out of place for her to have a big gun in a shoulder holster. But Gendo and Ritsuko don't want people to know they're armed. I mean, I think Masato actually normally brings her gun with her to work on a daily basis. I mean, we don't see it that much because I think it's in a shoulder holster underneath her jacket. But if this were real life, someone standing next to her could look at her and see, oh, you've got the bulge of a gun underneath your jacket. And it wouldn't seem out of place to them because, oh, she's head of the tactical department. Of course she has a gun. But you'd look at Gendo and go, Gendo, why'd you bring a gun today? I don't think Gendo and Ritsuko normally bring guns with them when they're in Nerve HQ. This is something they do specifically for End of Eva, I think. Because they know this is the final battle. They don't normally have guns with them, and even when they do, if they were just walking through a hallway, they wouldn't want people to know, I secretly have a gun with me. It's something they want, Ritsuko wants to conceal it in her pocket. Beyond that, there are assorted RPGs, flamethrowers, and other heavy weapons used by the JSSDF. I'm not too sure about the make of these. It doesn't really matter. Flamethrowers, RPGs, what have you. Oh, but next we come to a whole new set of weapons, the Evangelion guns. At first you think, oh, how could that be realistic? They're actually grounded in realism. The giant Evangelion robots use a variety of weapons, and several of them are so far advanced, because Evas are at the top of the bell curve. They verge on being purely science fiction positron rifles and stuff. I mean, remember when I said the bell curve of technology, that the Evas are at the top of the technology tree. The most advanced technology in the world in 2015 is being used on the Eva project. So positron rifles are just starting to be developed, and they only actually use them with the Evas very prominently, mostly towards the end of the series. They don't use them too often. They're very new. However, several of their weapons are clearly based on real-life firearms, which have been built on a larger scale so that a 40-meter tall humanoid robot can wield them. I mean, look, there's Eva 1 wielding a gun. It's been upscaled, but this is actually based on a real gun. See, that's the gun there. That's the real gun it's based on. This is a Steyr ACR. The standard issue ranged weapon of the Evangelions in the original series was referred to as a pallet rifle for some reason. I've never heard why. They never said why. But in the rebuild of Evangelion remake, they simplified this to just calling it the assault rifle, which I think is a good move. But nonetheless, it's clearly based on an upscale design of the Steyr ACR. Here's another picture of it there. The Steyr ACR was another entrant in the Advanced Combat Rifle program of 89 to 90. So, like the HK-G11, it was a reasonable extrapolation of what guns will look like in the near future. I mean, let's say it's 2010 when I'm making this. If Weta were to start making a live-action film right now, you would look at what are advanced real-life military prototypes for guns today. Not just stuff you make up in just random drawings. You would look at, well, what's the military thinking guns are going to be like 10, 20 years from now in their own prototype projects. And there you see a picture. The other two guns in this project didn't look future-y enough. They just looked like different M16s. The HK-G11 and the Steyr ACR, they have kind of a futuristic profile, so I think that's why they picked them. It looks different, but it's something that would exist in the real world. The Steyr ACR also has a bullpup design. As I said before, the magazine and the mechanisms are in the stock behind the trigger. This means that an Eva can hold it closer. The real-life one has a 24-round magazine, but they fire in the real gun fires flechettes, not bullets, and like armor-piercing sabot rounds. The real Evas in this show, they have a bigger clip size in this. You see them firing more. Obviously, they changed some of this. It's just for the profile, not realism in terms of clip size. But look, you see, there's Eva 1 holding it when it's fighting Shamshell. And this is a real gun. It's just being held by a 40-meter tall robot. That was episode 3. They use it again in episode 9 with the dancing fight against the twin angel. And see, in this shot right here, it's got a bullpup design, which means you can hold it closer to your body, and that means that Ava 1 can easily fire it from the hip. It doesn't need to hold it up like in a sniper position. You can fire the assault rifle from the hip pretty easily because it can hold it closer to the body. Other points in the series when you see it are episode 11 during the blackout thing where they have to crawl through vent shafts. They drop all of them. There's a clear shot of its profile there. And Ava 0 has to go down, grab it, throw one back up to Ava 1, which it then shoots up. Ava 0 briefly uses one, or holds one, in episode 18, but it gets stopped by Ava 3 before it can shoot it. But they send it out with one. It's their standard gun. Every Ava uses it at least once. Ava 1 was sent out with one to fight Ava 3, but it broke it when it drop-kicked it. There you see both Ava 1 and Ava 2 using it back in episode 9. And of course, when Asuka dual-wields Steyr ACRs in the fight against Zeruel in episode 19. They use these in many episodes. It's their standard gun. Well, those appear most frequently because they're their standard issue guns, but let's turn to other weapons that the Avas use that are based on real-life firearms, such as Ava Unit 1's handgun. There you see it shooting at the Angel, better angle. See the design? That actually seems to be based on a real-life Desert Eagle, the Desert Eagle Mark 19. It was only used in episode 16. Shinji fires his 6, possibly 7 times. There might have been an echo. It was off-screen. It doesn't matter. That's within the clip size of the smallest one. There are also different variants. There's a 35 caliber that carries 9 rounds, a 41 and 44 caliber that carries 8, and the 50 caliber Desert Eagle has a 7-round clip. Again, the upscaled guns. How do we know that they followed the design exactly for the big Ava version? But still, the design, you see, it's based on a real-life gun that it's using. It's not just ray guns. And lastly, we come to Ava Unit 0's sniper rifle. I think the idea is because Ava Unit 0 is kind of buggy, it's a prototype, it's not as strong as the other ones, they always give it ranged weapons and it attacks from a distance. And Ava 1 gets medium-range weapons like pistols or the assault rifle it uses pretty prominently. Whereas, given a choice, Asuka uses melee weapons. She uses battle axes and things, because, you know, Ava 2 is meant for combat. Anyway, Ava Unit 0's sniper rifle, it seems to be based on the Accuracy International Arctic Warfare Series sniper rifle, but there's kind of a problem. The rifle, as Ava 0 uses it, has 2 variations. In its first appearance in episode 16, it apparently has some form of a laser sight. However, it replaced this with an optical sight by second and final appearance in episode 23. This is what the Arctic Warfare Series real-life sniper rifle looks like. See the butt of the gun, the design of that, it's similar to the one Ava 0 uses, and notice the optical sight. And in episode 23, that's what it looks like. It's got an optical sight. But in episode 16, it had a laser sight. Here's a composite image. See, it's a laser sight on it. And the problem with that is, if you watch episode 23, I mean, because the budget was going to hell by the end of the series, it's got an optical sight in the wide shots, but in a couple of close shots, it's still got the laser sight. So if you watch episode 23, it just jumps back and forth between the two, because they were reusing old animation cells from episode 16, just colored differently and with some trees added in. You know, there were budget problems by the end of the show. The magazine size of the real-life one can be 5 to 10, and it is a bolt-action sniper rifle. You need to manually open and close the breech to eject each spent shell casing. But Rey fires 3 rounds in succession one-handed in episode 23, so it seems to be adapted to semi-automatic fire. As she also fires it 2 times from a sniper position in episode 16 without having to eject anything. So again, they're not exactly the same because they're built on an Ava scale, but they tried to make them look realistic. They also use things that are not ray guns, but real things like bazookas, And then they flat out use advanced weapons like positron rifles, that kind of thing. But here you see Eva 2 using a bazooka. I don't know if it's based on a real-life design or not. And that was in Episode 18. In Episode 19, it dual wields 2 bazookas, but I think they're meant to be a different kind than the other one, that they're smaller so they can be dual wielded, which I think was cool. So these are all of the real-life firearms designs used in Evangelion. But really, apart from the Eva guns and Masato's guns, all of them really appear in the end of the story, in End of Eva, in the finale movie, in the big fight scene there. So if and when this gets turned into a live-action film series, it would all happen in the final one. But really, if you think about it, the JSSDF invasion of Nerve HQ in End of Eva is one of the most infamous battle scenes in all of anime history. I mean, even 15 years later, we're still talking about it. Why? Well, Nerve HQ is like a computer clean room. It's a delicate high-tech science lab. And during the entire story preceding the finale, we never see any guns fired in the corridors. It's their comfort zone. Compared if a gunfight erupted in Spider-Man's Daily Bugle, or Lord of the Rings Scouring of the Shire, why did that hurt so much? It's a battle taking place in their comfort zone. I mean, it's a computer lab. It's not supposed to be a war zone. Compare like a movie that has a motorcycle chase on a highway versus a motorcycle chase within the halls of an office building. Or like Wet as King Kong, when Kong's storming around the jungles of Skull Island, that's not quite as scary as when he's storming around the streets of Manhattan, because it's just not expected. So in this entire fight scene they have in the final movie, it's just going to be amazing. You've got the JSSDF guys storming in with HKG-11s. You're going to have all this gunfire all over the place. Maya cowering under her desk in fear, refusing to fire a gun because she doesn't want to shoot another human being. You've got Hyuga and Aoba desperately fighting back with MPI-69s and Glocks, and they're hiding under their desks, barricading there, trying to coordinate Eva 2 in battle. And just, this is pure bedlam. This is what you think the end of the world is supposed to be like. This amazing fight scene, and they're using real-life firearms. They're not using lasers. That would somehow make it once removed from us. That's what makes it so scary when you see people shot with real-life bullets. So that's the visceral aspect of it that helps the audience connect. But on the other level I was talking about before, what does this tell us about Eva? Gainax wanted to ground it in realism. And for everyone that says it was such a surrealist series, please stop watching the dream sequences in an endless loop. You're not going to understand anything from that. It's like if you watched Lord of the Rings, endlessly rewatching just the scene where Gandalf is being resurrected, and it's kind of crazy cosmic stuff. You wouldn't gain further understanding of the show from that. You'd gain understanding by reading through Tolkien's notes and things where he says, well, this is how they build this thing. And extrapolating from that and descriptions in the text, well, this is what Gondorian armor must look like. This was actually one of the most realistic giant robot shows ever made. And the just culture and storyverse they invented for Eva is ours, just 20 years in the future, near future designs. So the guns of Evangelion and the design choices they made with that, and prop and set design and costuming, I guess, really helps inform us about the identity of the Evaverse as a whole.